Elon interacts with you. He retweeted about you.
That was terrible for my mental health, to be completely honest, because I felt like I had to be as knowledgeable as possible with every single detail as it pertained to Tesla, Elon, SpaceX, whatever. I was like literally on this thing, like, oh my God, what has broken? I gotta talk about it right now. And at some point I'm like, okay, this is crazy. Like if I do that for 20 more years, I'll die.
Social power becomes more powerful than money power. Elon has both.
As the graphics get better, as the AI in those systems gets better, at some point, a percentage of the population is gonna be like, well, this is better than real life. Why would I be in real life? That kind of scares me. I'll be completely honest. For me, it's like, okay, what's the purpose of us being alive then? If I think back to, okay, why did I leave Tesla in the first place? Was to do the things that I wanted to do every single day. What I don't want to do is generate content just for Elon to interact with it, right? I mean, he clearly has a lot of demons. He has a lot of things he has to work through as a human being.
Go yourself. Is that clear?
First question, who are you?
So I am Farzad Mesbahi. I've been doing, I guess, YouTube for the better part of 2 years now. And I've been just happened to land in the spot completely out of just happenstance, luck. It was something that I started doing for fun. And then before that, I worked at Tesla for a little bit over 4 years. I was at a distributor before that for a little over 7 years. Had started my own business with my wife as well while I was at Tesla. We had an escape room in Pennsylvania. I'm just a dude who just likes to do stuff that is fun. I don't even know how to better explain that. And this is what I'm doing now. I have a YouTube channel and I'm talking with you. That's who I am.
But your stuff are doing great recently. I think I subscribed to you when you had like 2,000 subscribers, 3,000 subscribers. But your Elon Musk stuff are blowing up recently.
Yeah. That stuff has been it's been very fun because I've been following Tesla pretty closely for the better part of 10 years. Elon is somebody that he's somebody that I admire. He does a lot of great stuff, especially from a business perspective. He's just somebody that you can tell is trying hard to make good stuff happen. And that's, it's inspired me, to work as hard as I can to do what I can to do good stuff, for people. So, and because I'm kind of close to that story, it seems like folks really enjoy watching my take as it pertains to what goes on, with Musk's businesses and whatnot. And I enjoy covering it because it's just a natural interest to me. I love technology. I love the automotive industry. I love artificial intelligence, and I love building for the future, right? And it just so happens that here's a guy that is finally, so we got somebody who's working really hard making that stuff happen. And so it's hard not to like him from that perspective. But yeah, I'm very fortunate. Again, I'm just very lucky to be able to do what I do. It's wild.
Okay, sometimes you are angry that you are so limited to Elon Musk stuff, or you wish, I wish I could talk about agriculture or something like that. Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't say that I don't think I ever get angry, honestly. I mean, I think for me, it's funny you asked this question because I put a post out there today on X where I was like I was thinking about, okay, when I started this channel for fun, at some point I'm like, okay, if I keep doing this thing, I'm going to have to be doing I'm going to have to pick a niche, right? I'm going to have to finalize my brand. I'm going to have to pick a niche. And, you're somebody who's done extremely well on YouTube, obviously. So you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Like YouTube puts you in a box, and then for you to really explode in that box, you have to just really nail that box perfectly. And for me, it's like the way I'm trying to approach this thing is I'm trying to hold very true to what I find interesting every single day. And it just so happens that a lot of the stuff that I find interesting is in the Tesla space, is in the sort of Musk space. But I am starting to veer off from time to time, especially on X, because I feel like that platform gives me a lot more freedom to explore. Whereas on YouTube, I do feel like I don't want to super disappoint my viewership by just going, I'm going this way now, bye, kind of thing, I want to be really cognizant of that. But at some point, I do think what works best for me mentally is if I don't put myself in the box as much as I can. And so X has been a perfect place for me to experiment, to sort of like dabble and to experience that a little bit. And then who knows, maybe on YouTube over time, I'll sort of shift gears and maybe start covering other stuff. But I'm just going with the flow. I'm going with the flow with whatever feels natural. And right now, what I feel natural is the content that I'm creating. And I'm just very happy that that content is resonating with people. There's nothing more I can ask for, really.
Interesting. What about the business aspect of what you are doing? I was very curious about. So you recently uploaded the podcast that happened on SpaceX. With Alex Jones, and it went viral here on YouTube. So, and I'm curious if you are making money on that.
Yeah, that stuff is definitely. So I didn't expect that podcast to generate any revenue whatsoever, because I fully expected YouTube to demonetize the hell out of it, because it's got Alex Jones, Andrew Tate, controversial topics. I'm like, yeah, this is a disaster. I might get a strike. The opposite happened. It was able to be monetized. And that was shocking to me, because what that tells me is that maybe there is now a hungriness, like that there's hunger for viewpoints that are controversial but need to be brought forward, that have been, like, say, artificially suppressed, that are now coming forward. And you have advertisers that seem very comfortable advertising on stuff on YouTube that's controversial, but they don't want to do it on X. So that's really weird. But it did generate a really decent amount of revenue, which I was surprised. For me, the supercuts are more about bringing, and this is where, like, I'm trying to think about, okay, what am I doing here on YouTube? What I'm thinking through is, like, if I think my channel would perform best if I bring forward to my audience what I'm exposed to, what I'm exposing myself to learn more about a certain person, or to learn more about the dynamics of what's happening. And that's where those supercuts, I think, are very valuable, because X is still a very small platform. X, if you think about the number of views on YouTube versus the number of views on X, it's like 100X, 1000X, who knows? And so I thought, okay, if we take the supercuts, we take out all the dead space, we boost the audio, we do everything we can to hold true to the copyright laws, and try to modify it in a way so that it does bring additional value to the listener. Then I'm like, okay, we do that, we put it on the channel, we show it to the people that watch my content, and then if that brings value, great. And if it doesn't, we'll see it in the algorithm. We'll see the views go down, be like, hey, I don't want to watch this is crap. But the opposite's happening. These supercuts are performing really well on YouTube. And it works for X too, because then you have a bunch of people that are like, what the hell? Where's this conversation happening? This is crazy. How can you have these people on the same call? And then, we make it very obvious. Click on this link to go back to the X space if you want to listen to the original, all that stuff. So, it just happened organically, and it happened from that guiding principle of, I'm going to cover what is interesting to me, because that supercut is not a Tesla thing. It's a societal, cultural thing with some very controversial people. It just so happens that Elon Musk was in the middle of it. And I'm figured, okay, people like Tesla, you generally like Elon Musk, probably makes sense to put this on there. And I naturally find it very interesting. So, and that's how it happened. It's wild. Okay,
interesting. But my question was, I want you to, so you are making this now as a business, right? This is your full-time thing, right? So I'm curious to explain me a bit more about so you are getting revenue from X, explain me all the stuff about the business side of what you are doing.
Yeah. So YouTube is somewhere upwards of 95% of the revenue that I'm getting from this media thing. Initially, it started as a hobby. It was I'm doing it for fun. It was after I left Tesla, so I had zero intention to turn this into a business whatsoever. And then as I became more and more fascinated with the process, and I really started to love it, and I saw that there was a viable use case for a business from ad revenue, and really that's where basically 100% of my income not 100%, like 98% of my income comes from ad revenue, 2% comes from Athletic Greens sponsorship. But over time, as the channel grew into became more popular, it's just the number kept going up. it just kept going up. I'm like, okay. So then I was able to bring somebody on board with David Carbot, who is my media guy. And he helps me with supercuts. He helps me with edits. He helps me with those X spaces and some, more high production video. And then
your first employee, your first person in the team is very special.
It is. Yes, sir. Yeah, and he's great. I mean, David, for anyone who's watching this video who's looking for sort of somebody that does really good work with that, David's incredible. I don't want to hog him to myself. Like, he's building his own thing, and I want to make sure his name is out there. So David Carbot, you can find him on X. Phenomenal work. And yeah, and it just so happened that one happened randomly.
Link in the description.
Yes, that would be great. And yeah, and that just happened naturally. That just happened. He sent me a cut of a video on my channel. And then after I received, I'm like, this is great. Do you want to do more? Sure. And then and then it transformed into the relationship we have now. So, and it sounds loose and it sounds like I don't really have anything perfectly planned, because I don't. The luxury that I have is that I don't necessarily have to have this kind of business, because I've been very fortunate to where I'm at this point. It's just my guiding principle after leaving Tesla was, invest your time in things that you truly love. And I truly love this. And I think maybe that's why it's successful, because maybe people can see that I really love this. And that's why, the channel is performing the way it's performing. And that's where I'm really grateful. It's just, I'm going with my gut. I'm going with what I love, and it's doing its own thing.
So can you tell me a bit more stuff about what you were doing at Tesla?
Yeah. So I was in the supply chain team. I worked on parts distribution with the company. So I joined in 2017, and my job with a few other folks was to grow the supply chain and distribution team to be able to keep track with the release of the Model 3. So back in 2017, Tesla basically was transforming from a 50,000 per year car company to a 500,000 per year car company. And the manufacturing was blowing up. It was getting gigantic. But the parts distribution centers and the service centers and all that stuff, the supply chain, the ugly stuff, the not sexy stuff with manufacturing also needed to grow. And that's where I came in. So, and it was primarily on the distribution side of parts. So I did that for a little over 4 years. Majority of the time I was outside of Pennsylvania. They had a facility, or they still have a facility there. And then my last year I moved to Texas with the intention of, starting working at the Austin Gigafactory here in Texas before it was built. But then towards the latter half of 2021, I made the decision to, start my own chapter, with my wife, start traveling and kind of figure out what life has in store for me after that.
Yeah, interesting. So first of all, I don't know if you know anything about me, but when I was doing, I
hugged Elon.
Yes. so I'm not sure which one. Here we probably have one of the two biggest fans of him in the world, talking and exploring stuff. But I'm bringing this point to tell you a thought that I had. So when I was doing the 3 months out of SpaceX and X, living on my sleeping bag and all this stuff, it was very frustrating to be checking all the time what Elon is doing on Twitter and if there is anything new that he is doing, for me to get some hints about. So probably you have similar thing, because a lot of the stuff that you are doing depends to his. If he has an announcement, if he tweets something interesting, and you're going to make a piece of content out of that. So do you feel this like, oh my God, I need to be active, I need to have notifications to cover this immediately and all this stuff? Or you don't feel at all this?
That's such a good question. That is such a good question. I used to feel that a lot. I'm going to be completely honest. I used to feel that a lot. And that's where I found myself, that's where a lot of my burnout came from. Was that, I'm a person who's sort of, my interests change from day to day. The things that I want to talk about change from day to day. And what was happening was I felt like I had to be as knowledgeable as possible with every single detail that as it pertained to Tesla, Elon, SpaceX, whatever. And so, and that's what I was. I was like literally on this thing, like, oh my God, notifications on. What has broken? I got to talk about it right now. And then that was terrible for my mental health, to be completely honest, because if I think back to, okay, why did I leave Tesla in the first place, was to just pursue the things, like do the things that I wanted to do every single day. And I love Tesla. I love Elon. I love everything that he's doing. Okay. But like, sometimes I just want to play video games. Sometimes I want to go travel. Sometimes I want to, go out on a date with my wife, right? Sometimes I don't want to look at it. I want like 24, 48 hours, 72 hours of just like empty brain, right? And as the time went on, I started becoming more comfortable with that idea where I didn't feel like I had to sit down and make content every single day to cover this story. And that took a switch of my brain, because I'm sure you feel this as a creator too, is like, if you're not on top of it 24/7, you probably feel like you are missing out on something, or you are losing the opportunity to make a piece of content that's great. Or if you have a growth target, that it's going to somehow prevent you from reaching that growth target, or that your audience is going to forget about you and they're going to find somebody else that does something similar or the same thing and they did it better potentially because you didn't do anything, right? And at some point I'm like, okay, this is crazy. I can't live like that. Like if I do that for 20 more years, I'll die. It's just unsustainable. So at some point, I told myself, okay, just be comfortable with the fact that some days you're not going to be as into it as you usually are, and allow yourself to just let your mind wander where it goes. And that's where, for me, X has been super helpful, because I've been using X as the place to dump that creative juice of wherever else my mind goes. Sometimes I want to talk about politics. Sometimes I want to talk about technology or some sort of trends that are happening there. My wife and I are expecting a child in May, our first kid. I made a post about becoming a father. Thank you. I made a post about becoming a father and what does that mean to me? The way that I feel. And so I'm very much like, I would consider myself a very creative person, and I have in my entire life. Like I love to do the art of creation a lot, but not specifically related to Tesla and Elon and whatever 100% of the time, even though I very much love to do that. But if I don't have those breaks, when something does break that needs to be covered and I'm burned out, I'm not going to be able to cover that nearly as well as I should, unless I had a fresh brain to go into it. And that's where having those breaks are very, very helpful. And I force myself to have them. And I have someone like my wife that keeps me honest with that too. That's very important for me too. I have somebody that has the checks on me as well. How do you struggle with that now? Like, do you still struggle with it today, or has that changed for you?
No, after I finished the Elon Musk thing, it was fine, because I stopped checking and having notifications. So now I don't even have notifications when people call me for a phone call. So I only get it when I want to now. But it was so people will probably not understand, because it's your job. You want to be good at your job, and you are constantly trying 24/7 to see all this stuff, and then it sounds like, it's not a big deal, it's just notification, but the stress that you have, I don't think a lot of people can get this. I'm curious as
it's
well. I experienced the same thing when you talk about it. I had like 100 followers on Twitter when I started the whole series. And just because I was doing it about Elon, and Elon is a superstar on Twitter, on X, I gained in 2.5 months like 40,000 followers on Twitter. So because of this, so this is a huge market if you are associated and if you are talking about Elon. But it becomes a lot more crazy when Elon interacts with you. So, and I saw a lot of stuff that he retweeted about you and all this stuff. So I'm curious to hear your growth experience, how it went.
Yeah, I mean, it started sort of, I've had Twitter since 2008, I think, is when I signed up for the service. I've had it for a long, long time. But I never really used it I put my, I use it like kind of how I use it now. I have a brain fart and I put it on there. It's just now more people are like, oh, that's brain fart smells good. Like whatever, I don't even know. But I use it in a very similar way. And at some point last year, Elon started following folks that cover Tesla pretty closely. So he followed me. He followed Sawyer, Dave Lee, Rob Maurer, Stephen Mark Ryan, a bunch of people. I mean, the list is long. And because I happened to be in that space and already covering it, and he started following me, anytime I would write a thing that is related to Tesla, then, he would reply or he would like. And that when he does that, because his following is so freaking large, that gets additional exposure for the post. It's crazy, but I'm conflicted, right? It's one of those things that's like, it's difficult sometimes to sort of mentally go through it, because what I don't want to do, and I'm being completely honest, and I think this would be a disservice to Elon as well. What I don't want to do is generate content for the sake just for Elon to interact with it, right? And that's where it becomes really difficult for me. That's like one of my battles, because it's like, okay, I truly want to be impartial when it comes to Tesla. I truly want to be impartial when it comes to Elon. I am absolutely biased towards the positive of those companies and that person, because they've taken care of me. Like, the reason why I'm able to do what I do is because Tesla allowed me to essentially become financially independent. So by nature, I'm going to be biased, right? But I try my best to okay, just look at the facts, look at what's happening. You understand the space really well. Just talk about it in that sense, right? Just talk about it in that sense. And if Elon finds it fascinating or something that he likes to share, okay, what am I supposed to do? I feel like if I, it's at some point I got to be like, okay, what's the alternative? Don't do what you like to do. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to stop doing what I like to do. So I'm just going to keep doing what I like to do. It just so happens that the dude interacts with it. And when he does interact with it, the app becomes unusable because my notifications are like freaking going crazy, right? And so at some point I got used to it. It's just a new norm. For the first couple of days, I was a little like, oh, if I post something, Elon's going to see it. Oh my God, that's kind of crazy. What is that about, But then after a while, I'm like, okay, it's just Elon. Who cares? It's another guy. If he doesn't like it, whatever. It is what it is. Like, what am I supposed to do? He's another human being. I'm another human being. I think as long as it's obvious that I am doing it for me, to myself, as long as I make it obvious to myself that I'm doing it for me, I have zero issues with whatever happens. Elon interacts, Elon doesn't like, or whatever else. But it is challenging. There is a challenge there, because I'm constantly asking myself, on a weekly basis, almost a daily basis, why am I making this post? Am I making this post because of me, or am I making this post because of my audience? And sometimes when I'm making Tesla related posts, am I making this because I want Elon to interact with it? Or am I making this because this is exactly what I believe, and this is 100% aligned with how I'm thinking about it? I've thought about this a lot. I really have, because we can't ignore the impact of somebody that has as much influence as Elon when they follow you. Like this is sort of in a digital world where social media has so much weight in how people talk to each other. You have to think about this, right? And so I spent a lot of time thinking about that. But my conclusion was, if it aligns 100% with what you want to do, and it's something that you're doing it for you, not for anybody else, just post it. And then once I'd really honed in on that idea and I became comfortable with it, it's been freeing, because then I don't feel the weight, this massive weight of like, oh, Elon follows you. I'm like, okay, he follows me. It is what it is. Okay, great. There's nothing else I can do.
Interesting. I'm happy that it was a process, though, and you are honest about it, because it was the same thing about, for example, I one of my inspirations on YouTube was Mr. Beast, and after I became like friends with him, and he was watching my stories on Instagram and all this, I was like, oh my God, if I post this is going to I didn't have any interest of actually but it gets even crazier in your position, because not only this dude that I admire will see it, but it's a very good business decision for him to see it and interact with him. So it all becomes blurry as well. Yeah.
Yeah. You're 100% right. It's difficult. It is difficult. But I'm also very thankful for it. Let's be honest. I'm very thankful for it because it is teaching me how, like, it has taught me the value of doing things for your own happiness and for the, like, this is a fulfillment for me, right? Even if the richest guy in the world is like theoretically can interact with my posts, the fact that I'm not thinking about that when I create content to me is like I should give myself a pat in the back because it's like, holy shit, you're 100% right. If somebody wanted to leverage that attention for a sort of as a business case, they 100% could, you know? And I'm sure at some point Elon's going to be like, okay, this dude is like, okay, these unfollow, block, or whatever, right? Like at some point, if you get greedy with that stuff, it becomes obvious because people can smell BS. People can smell it, right? But it is 100% a process. But I'm very grateful for that experience because I think now I've experienced something that I never in 1,000 years, you know, not until we sat down and talk about this have I really actually, you know, reflected on this. Never in 1,000 years would I have seen myself in this position. And the fact that I am, and I learned some valuable lessons from it, I'm thankful. I'm eternally thankful because I know sometime in 10, 20 years down the road in my life, I'm going to be able to look back to this experience and be like, okay, this is the lesson I learned. And I'll be able to apply it 10, 20 years down the road. You know, I don't know how or why, but it's a big enough thing that I've learned. Like I can feel this in my gut. It's a big enough thing that I've learned that at some point it will help me with life at some point.
Wow. What about other things that came because of this experience? For example, you are getting VIP access here and there. Like, for example, for me, when I put the hug with Elon, I got some billionaires to send me text on Twitter. So, like, what did you got? I mean, because it's crazy, like how much power this guy has.
Yeah, I mean, from my standpoint, I wouldn't even categorize this as like a VIP access, but I think the thing that makes it feel different than say like a regular person, you know, which I very much consider myself to be very much a regular person that just happens to have a camera, right, and a microphone. I like to talk. Okay, sorry, it's somehow aligned this way, right? I would say that when I go to these like Tesla related events, which I would go to anyway, I'm instead of being just somebody in the audience that gets to experience it, I have a lot of people that come up to me that, you know, want to talk to me, want to take a picture, want me to sign something, which for me is like insanely surreal. Because I'm like, why do you want me to ruin whatever I'm signing? Like, I literally had a guy, I've had this happen multiple times. They'll come up and like have a piece, like a trim of their car. That they have, you know, people sign, like Sandy Monroe has signed it or Elon Musk has signed it. And they're like, can you please sign this for me? I'm like, this is crazy. Like, why would you have me sign? Like, it makes no sense to me. But like that kind of experience is crazy to me, you know, because you would think in your head, why would somebody do this? And the reason why is because they feel, and this is where it's so humbling, they like you. They like you so much that they want a memory of you on something that they love. And that's extremely humbling, you know? And that's been my biggest sort of, I guess, quote unquote, VIP experience is that I get to meet so many people that really appreciate what I do. And then I get to see them as real people and not just like a number on a website. They're actually living human beings that have an appreciation for what I do. And that's incredibly humbling, you know? And it's wild. It's crazy, you know? Yeah, honestly, outside of that, it's really, you know, maybe I was able to meet like a couple people from Tesla at an event because, oh, I know this Farzad guy. You want to meet him? Sure. You know, we shook hands and I'm like, yeah, I used to work there. They're like, yeah, I know. And then we talk about work and then we move on. I'm like, okay, that's just a normal conversation. I just happened to, you know, meet that person because of that. But nothing comes out of that. For me, it's more like meeting the people that like what I do is what's my biggest takeaway from having this platform and being associated to the brand, I guess, in an adjacent way.
I was thinking about this very deeply, and I actually think the world that we are moving in 2024, 2025, 2026, whatever, social power becomes more usable and more powerful than money power. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this topic. And it's interesting that Elon has both.
Yeah. That is actually very interesting. You know, the way I think about that. So you're literally saying like somebody that has a lot of followers on social media will be able to it's like a higher value asset than actual money. That's your thesis. Okay. I mean, what's crazy about that is in a world of artificial intelligence where everything becomes incredibly cheap, like, and then money almost has no purpose. Why wouldn't that be the case? You know? Well, what do you think? Because that's a very interesting thought. Like, and this is where I struggle to conceptualize what I've built with the social media platform, because you know, I don't know if you suffer from this as well, but I have a serious case of imposter syndrome that I'm trying to work through. You know, I'm trying to work through my imposter syndrome. And so like a question that you've just proposed, I've never thought of deeply, really, because I'm like, well, it's for fun. It's still for fun. Yeah, it's generating good revenue and it's something that I enjoy to do. But, you know, I don't have like a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. But what you just described is going to be very much part of the times. Like if AI successfully brings the cost of technology, products, services down so that most people can afford whatever they want, then of course by rule, money becomes a lot less valuable because most people will be able to have basically everything they want. And so what are the things that become really valuable in that world? I still think where you live is going to be extremely important and valuable, because not everyone can live in Malibu. Not everyone can live on a Mediterranean. Not everyone can live in Barcelona, right? So like that still becomes a very valuable thing. And then we have to decide, okay, do we use money for that, or do we use how many followers you have to decide who lives where, you know? It becomes really weird. It becomes really, really weird. So what do you think this world looks like then? Like, what's your conclusion from this?
Well, for me, I was actually thinking a bit more short term, not going to the AI abundance, which you took it to a very interesting point that actually it seems like is irrelevant, the money there, and social power is the power that we're going to be striving for, probably. But I was actually thinking from a personal experience, like, I'm a YouTuber.
Okay.
Let's say I have a lot of subscribers, but in my country, I am kind of the most famous person. Oh, I got some confettis. So being in my country and seeing this power of being the most famous person in the country, which is only 1 million population, it kind of opened my eyes and thought that, bro, even if I had $10 million, $100 million, this power that I'm able to talk to any person I want, I'm able to podcast any person I want, I'm able to start I go to the streets and like people show me so much love. I go to places and pay for food and they don't let me pay because they like me. So, and it's like all the other stuff that you are doing as a businessman, all the leverage that you need is in that social power. So I'm like started becoming zero interested in money now, and I'm only caring about social power.
Okay. I mean, that's fascinating. And it's something that, I mean, I very much, I 100% see where you're coming from, because I mean, I see this too, you know, like I don't have $100 million in the bank, but I know people that do. And those people are able to create relationships, make deals, put themselves in a position to really capitalize on an opportunity that without that, let's say that social clout, let's say, without knowing somebody or without other people knowing that they were as successful as they are, they would have never gotten that opportunity, right? And it's kind of like a byproduct of maybe how much money you have, in a way. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's like, oh, you're the guy that I saw that won this thing. Like for example, Novak Djokovic. He's won the most Grand Slams in tennis in the history of the world, more than Federer, more than Nadal, and I freaking love Nadal. I was born in Spain, and Nadal is my guy. But Joker, you can't deny him, right? Novak Djokovic, even though he has $100 million in the bank, to your point, that dude he doesn't have to worry about nothing. Why? Because he's Novak Djokovic, So, but the very interesting point there is that I think that probably gets amplified. I really think that gets amplified as money becomes less and less, like we enter the age of abundance. Like, I think you're 100% right, and it's only going to get wider. Like the gap between the power of social clout, whatever the hell you want to call it, followers, how many people know you, the power of that versus the power of money will diverge, right? But is that a good thing though? I don't even know if that's a good thing. Do you think that's a good thing?
Well, first of all, we're not talking about, for everyone to understand, we're not talking about the end goal here, or success is money or success is fame.
Of course.
We're just comparing things, which one is a better tool to use and navigate to do stuff in the world. And but
right.
I don't know. To me, to me is this topic is confusing a bit, because it's crazy to me that actually when I see one person that has $100 million and has 0 followers, I don't consider him as socially successful. And success is like, let's take a lot of a lot of metrics to judge success. And I feel if you want to live in a farm in the middle of nowhere and be happy, that's success for me. But let's talk about social success, what other people think is successful. I think if you have $100 million and you get 1,000 views on your podcast or whatever the thing that you go as a guest, I don't feel that's power. I don't know if you disagree.
I agree. I mean, I think there's, there is power in money though, right? There's definitely power in money, because it does allow you to, set yourself in a situation where you are able to leverage that money to get more money. So in a way, it's access to power. But I think the conversation here is the social power, which if you really think about it, has been part of human nature for really ever. I mean, you go back to 10,000 years ago, and when we were small tribes of people, who had the most power? The elder
before money,
right? It's the people at the head of the tribe, the elder people as well, right? Those people had a ton of power. So it's that social power was super, super important. Experience and having been there and being seen as somebody that's very important and has achieved a lot, And so there's no reason why, it's still true today. But I think it's two kinds of different forms of power. I have to think about this more deeply, because you bring up a really interesting point. You really do bring up a really interesting point. What I can't help but go, the way my brain works is I always end up 10 to 20 years ahead. It's and I almost learned this from Tesla, honestly. Being at the company has rewired my brain of what's the thing that's happening now, what's going to look like 10 to 20 years down the road, right? So it's for me, it's okay, how can I bring this back a little bit and then think about what that means in today's world? 100%, it has a ton of power. It's just, again, my thing becomes, in a world of abundance, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. It's such a fascinating topic, dude. I got to think about it more deeply.
Okay, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I started believing that Elon is a bit more interested in the social power the last couple of years than the money power. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I think for sure. I mean, I think if, Elon's the richest person in the world, he's got 200 some odd billion dollars in assets and stocks and whatever. I think it also helps that the guy isn't motivated by money per se. You can kind of see this too, like in the way he behaves. When he told the advertisers to GFY, that a guy who cares about money will never say that ever. So that was interesting. But I do think I
watched these clips so many times. It was amazing. I was like, God, oh my God, he really said that. Oh my God.
Wild, And it makes it even crazier because no one in his position would ever do that. No CEO of any other company on planet Earth would ever in a trillion years do that. So like it's already unique enough to tell a business partner to go away, but it's even more so when the CEO of some of the most popular companies on planet Earth is saying that at the New York Times panel in front of tens of millions of people watching. Okay, wild. But I do think that the social power for him, I think, is also very useful, because if you really think about what he's trying to do with Tesla, what he's trying to do with SpaceX, the long-term goals of those businesses are to transition the world towards to his vision, which is, sustainable transport in Tesla, and then, reusable rockets and going to Mars with SpaceX. To be able to do that, you have to create relationships with a lot of nations. You have to create a lot of relationships with world governments and other people. And in a way, a lot of those things do happen through money. Like if you go to say the government of, let's use a recent example, Italy, for example. He's been to Italy a couple of times. I know Italy's trying to court him to come there and make a gigafactory for Tesla. They're trying so hard to get him there. Like that would still happen if Tesla, Tesla's making money. It's a good company. It's obviously very successful, but I don't think Italy will go nearly as hard and make the social sort of, getting him on the stage and having him talk about the future, making the announcements very public. You wouldn't see that unless Elon does have that sort of social power. And so when that happens, not only does that work for Italy, because now they're getting a person in there that's revered worldwide and people see as somebody that's very successful. That works for Italy because they're like, oh, look at how good we are. We're bringing Elon in, which is the social power. But then Elon can also leverage that social power to be like, they're going to put me on a camera and I'm just going to be able to talk about Tesla. And then millions of people will hear about Tesla and then the brand will grow, right? So it's like, I 100% agree with you. And I don't know, what I do wonder, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Like, I wonder how much of this is truly premeditated, where he sat down and done the math, because he's obviously a brilliant guy, or it's just like he's just flying by the seat of his pants and the opportunity came up and he's just going with it because he knows it's going to help him. Like, I don't know if he's actually investing in social power, or he just happened to have social power because he's doing the right things without him even trying to get social power. Does that make sense?
Yes. First of all, I thought when he was traveling across all these countries, to Turkey, to Israel, to Italy, to whatever he did, he went, I thought it's more like an X game of like him getting some relationship with the regulators or the presidents to understand about rules and all this stuff. So that's what my initial thoughts was, not about Tesla and potential Tesla stuff, which probably I'm completely wrong. But to the question that you asked me, if he's consciously trying to, I think he does, subconsciously though, not like, okay, today we are going to upload this thing because of this and this. But you focus your energy where, he's very smart. He's not just doing stuff. So he's probably thinking about naturally and subconsciously that I need to grow on that. He feels it. It's a gut feeling, and you're drawn to that thing. Like he was with Tesla. So I think it's him naturally understanding the power of this and investing subconsciously time on that. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think you're probably right. I mean, I think somebody, you know, I think that's where I'm landing too, is like, at that point, it's like impossible to ignore just how much power, like that social power you have. It's impossible. Like it's so weird that the richest man in the world can also have the biggest gaming live stream in the world. You know, like what? It's so wild. You know, it's so strange, but it really talks to how, you know, if he sees the numbers when he's live streaming Diablo and he's got 100,000 people watching him, that's about as clear of as an indication of social power that you'll ever get. Like something so benign and random, you have 100,000 people watching you play Diablo 4. It's wild. It's crazy. But I think you have your finger on the pulse as far as where we're going as a society with social power. I really do.
But you see what we're talking about now with presidents and all this. What you want as a human when you want to feel in a way powerful, that I can talk to any president I want. So it seems that even for him, this social power is more important. And like this social power gives you so many perks. It's like the war happened in Hamas and in Israel, in Palestine and Israel, and he went there and they gave him a private tour on the places that people died. And it's like, I'm not saying that but this is who else in the world, like if you are talking about perks, to have a private show of the place that is the most interesting place in the world by the prime minister of the place and all the higher people of Israel. It's like, and they didn't do it to Bill Gates. They didn't do it, but Bill Gates has also social power. But let's say Jeff Bezos or someone else that has less social power. Yeah. So it's interesting.
It's very interesting. Yeah, it's for again, someone of his stature, like somebody like him that's in that position, it's impossible to ignore. And I think it comes down to the individual, how they want to leverage it. Like, do they want to leverage it for personal gain? Do they want to leverage it to build their businesses? Do they want to leverage it for more exposure? Or are they just doing it because, you know, or do they want to leverage it because they feel like they're doing the right thing? And that's where, like, it's up to the individual to decide. But like, so very few people have that power. So very few people have that power. And I think that's part of, like, you know, if I'm going to comment specifically on Elon, I think that's part of why he has such a big following, because it's my sense that most people that like him feel that he's leveraging his power for the betterment of humanity, both social and for money, right? Like money power and social power. And that's my gut feel, is that most people perceive that he's leveraging that power for good. And we've seen so many examples of people that have money power and social power, and they don't end up using it for good. They end up using it for personal gain. Like, I mean, good for them. When I say good, it's like for the betterment of humanity. At least that's the perception, right? I'm not Elon. I'm not in his brain. I've never personally met the guy. But the perception, I think, is that he is using it for good, and that's why he has so many people that like him, if I were to guess.
Okay, so let's move in a bit of the futuristic plans about his companies. I want you to talk maybe about Starlink. What do you think of Starlink and the long-term play of Starlink and SpaceX as a whole later?
Yeah, I think Starlink is a very interesting one, because Starlink kind of came out of nowhere. You know, Starlink was never part of the initial SpaceX mission of going, multiplanetary species. It was an offshoot of trying to get SpaceX to be more profitable. It was like, well, we're already sending the rocket up in the air. How much more expensive is it going to be to send our own satellites up there? It's like, well, like nothing. Like, okay, do it. And SpaceX and Starlink was born. And what's hilarious about Starlink's success is that the only reason why Starlink is so successful It's because every other satellite internet provider is the worst ever, right? There is a giant innovation gap between what Starlink is able to do and what other satellite companies are able to do. And a lot of it is tied to the rocket technology. You can't really put up 10,000 satellites in space that are in low Earth orbit that give you low ping and good bandwidth unless you are able to shoot up a metric ton of rockets into space. And the only player that can do that is SpaceX, right? So it's a moat. It's very much a moat. So what does that mean long term? It means that SpaceX will probably have it will definitely have the most satellites in space by far out of anybody. They already do. Like, it's probably 99.9% of satellites in space will be Starlink at some point. And then they'll have basically, I don't want to call it a monopoly, but there'll be no reason for anybody to not use Starlink internet access in places that aren't like super heavily dense, right? And you think about, how much of the Earth is covered in just land and where people are. Like, there's so much land out there that is now getting really good internet access that never was the case before. So I think what Starlink is going to enable over time is I think it's going to enable people to become like Starlink and renewable energy, like solar panels and batteries, as that becomes more affordable. I think we're going to see like people starting to become like get away from city centers more and be willing to go out more into like, say, lands that typically people aren't in, because now you have access to internet, which allows you to, like, if you're creative and you're somebody, and in the age of artificial intelligence, you'll be able to basically live a very comfortable life without having to be in a city, unless you really want to be in a city. And that's where I think Starlink is going to have a giant influence on the population. It's probably going to take 20 years for this to happen, if I were to guess. But that's where it's very exciting for the long-term potential of the company. You're going to have great internet everywhere. It's like, why wouldn't people go to places where they can have their own land and, live that beautiful ranch life if they really wanted to, and they can get really good internet while they're doing it. That's what I think is going to go. Where do you think it's going to go?
Bro, already when I ask you something, you answer and then you ask me back. This is the podcast that we ask you questions.
All right, fair enough. I'm so used to asking, because I do my own podcast too, so it's like, sorry.
No, but I don't mind, fair because it comes from curiosity for you to learn. So I don't mind. I enjoy it. Because when you ask always questions, it's weird when they ask you back. So I'm just referencing that it was weird for me.
I get it.
Probably you ask me the most questions out of every guest that I ever had. So that's why I have.
Okay, fair enough.
What I was saying, so there is couple. I want you to maybe tell me if you think as well they will have a separation as companies with SpaceX, but. You said something interesting before as well. You said that land will become more useful in the future. And I actually think that's not the case because of what you described now. Okay. I had the whole December, I spent wearing a VR headset. I spent 30 days in a VR headset for a YouTube video without taking it off, waking up on it, sleeping on it all the time. And with the Meta Quest 3, and with also, I don't know, probably you saw Mark Zuckerberg and Lex Friedman talking with the VR and with the holograms.
Wild.
So it's wild. So I just think of the future, the next 10 years, location will be irrelevant in a way, because you can have anyone you want in your room. So there is no reason to be in San Francisco.
But I think, so you can still have that world and be able to live in a place where you don't have to pay an arm and a leg and be on top of each other in a city center. And instead you can be living in, some middle part of the country that typically wouldn't be accessible or really livable because of lack of resources and like lack of infrastructure. But with the advent of Starlink, with the advent of solar power and batteries at your house, and the advent of making energy extremely cheap because of renewable sources, which will make desalination of water incredibly cheap and transportation incredibly cheap. So like you can actually have plenty of water in places that don't have water. Like infrastructure will change, I think, to make it very, very affordable to live in beautiful, gorgeous places that are sparse, where you don't have to be in a city. And you can still do that on top of that too, right? You can, and you can leverage Starlink to do that. Like, because otherwise the alternative is, because I guess what you're describing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that people that, like you see a future of always being connected. And because we're always connected, we're going to end up being in the place that we already are, which is 80% of the population live in cities already, right? And so if you live in a city and all you do is wake up and put this stupid thing on your face, and that's how you live your life for the rest of your life, then that's what it is. And that's where you see us going as a species. Did I say that? Is that correct?
Maybe not, but you just spotted. I have a big problem that I am stupid in explaining things. So, and I don't know why I'm doing this job as a podcaster. But but probably I don't think locations will matter as much to be in Portugal, to be in San Francisco or Texas, because there is all these people. Probably locations because you are going to, I don't know, have a Neuralink in your brain and like have everyone having a meeting with you and seeing them in front of you, because like it was crazy when I had the VR. I felt that was the real world, and communicating with other people and having a mixed reality headset, I think where the world is kind of going. And I think Meta and Apple Vision Pro and all this stuff are trying to tackle this problem. So I feel that the locations will not probably matter in the future, because if you have a Neuralink and you can see a person as a hologram in your place, why you should pay 100 times the rent and just not move to Bali or India or whatever the thing is to. So this is kind of what was my rhythm of thought that I was explaining badly before.
That makes that helps me. Yeah, I mean that's totally a possibility. I mean, I think, I've used VR in the past. I have an HTC, what is a Vive or something. I haven't used it in a minute because it's like I hate dealing with the wires. It's like one of those things where like I haven't bought like one of those wireless ones where you can just stick in your head. But that kind of worries me a little bit too. Like I can see the incredible. Obviously, it's such incredible technology, and it's going to give so many people the ability to experience life in a different way. And it's game-changing technology. But then if you take that to the extreme, it's going to be humanity living in a digital world instead of a physical world. Because as it gets more advanced, as the graphics get better, as the AI in those systems gets better, as the feature set gets better, the resolution gets better, then, at some point, a percentage of the population is going to be like, well, this is better than real life. Why would I be in real life? And then the question becomes, as technology gets better, does that percentage get bigger? And if the percentage gets bigger, then I'm like, okay, so then like, what are we at that point? It's like Black Mirror. You ever watch the show Black Mirror? Yeah, it's like that. And I don't know if that's good. I don't know if that's a good thing, And that's where like, it's like one of those like scary trends for me, because it does mean leaving the physical world behind, because the digital world is going to be that much better. I don't know, man. That kind of scares me. I'll be completely honest. That kind of scares me, because I like the physical world. I like being at a fire, playing my guitar, hanging out with friends. I'm the guy with the guitar at the fire. Okay, I'm sorry, everybody. Eating s'mores, having a beer, and enjoying the smell. But then your point is, okay, well, you're going to be able to do that anyway in VR at some point. So like, what's the difference? And you won't be able to tell the difference between real and not real. So it's like, okay, just do that in VR. It'll be exactly the same thing. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know.
we don't know anyways if we're really living in the real world now. So
that's true.
That's another philosophical thing about consciousness and all this stuff that Elon is very interested in as well. So what do you think about the Starlink? Do you think it will become an independent company? I read that somewhere that it will have an IPO itself or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the plan was at some point to IPO Starlink. I believe the president of SpaceX, Gwen Shotwell, said that at some point they'll IPO Starlink and make it its own thing. But I don't know if maybe the plans have changed, because what Starlink is doing now, it's enabling SpaceX to be basically cash flow positive, meaning that SpaceX is no longer losing money because, the Starship development is very expensive. So Starlink can now fund SpaceX. And I'm not so sure, like if they IPO Starlink, will SpaceX still be able to raise funds through Starlink to be able to become self-sufficient? And theoretically, I guess they could, because they're really just selling rocket services to Starlink, So Starlink part of the cost structure for Starlink will be the paying for rockets, and then SpaceX revenue will come from Starlink from the services that they charge, and then they pay Starlink, and Starlink gets that revenue. So I guess in theory, you could still make SpaceX cash flow positive. It's just you now have a public company in Starlink, and I know Elon doesn't like running public companies because of the regulations and all the other things that you have to sort of do as a public company. You have to report earnings every quarter. You have so many freaking regulations that you have to uphold, and all this other stuff too. So maybe at some point it will break out. But I think eventually SpaceX will become public. But it's probably going to take a long time for that to happen. So who knows? We'll see. It all depends how the company wants to deal with how they want to count the revenue, and how, if it's going to, if going public will reduce the chance for SpaceX to fund their Starship operations, they won't go public. But if it doesn't, they'll go public.
Interesting. How do you have an estimation of how many years you see SpaceX going to public? Public is like 30 years, 40 years?
Oh man. Definitely not this decade, for sure. I think for them to go public, and Elon has talked about like the threshold that the company would have to meet is to have a regular, he says regular flights to Mars, where it's like they have a self-sustaining base and they have stuff going there. But I'm not so sure they have to wait that long. Because to become public, really, the reason why you want to become public truly is because you want to have access to public funds. You want to have access to the public to raise capital from public markets. And then the people that work at the company that have stock can then basically earn a significantly higher living potentially by their company name trading in the public markets versus the private markets. So it's like, okay, at some point, if that becomes the priority for the company, then they'll go public. But they require, I think it would be much better for SpaceX to do that if they say are doing Starship flights to the moon, where they're generating like space tourism in a way. Maybe they're doing intercontinental flights for cargo from, say, Australia to New York in 90 minutes or something, where they can generate a ton of revenue from that. Definitely not this decade. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the 2030s, SpaceX goes public. But that's so far. That's so long from now. Anything could change between now and then, But if it were to go public, definitely not within the next 10 years. It's probably going to take longer.
Okay. By the way, when I went, just for everyone to know, when did you ever went to SpaceX in Boca Chica?
No, I never saw it in person. Mm-mm.
It's crazy. It's like, and there is so many. I was living there for like in my tent in my sleeping bag for like 1 month, 1.5 months, and there is thousands of people that just drive by as fans. They want to see the rocket. It's like a museum you can see, and
wow.
Like it's very interesting. The things is ginormous, and like you get to learn so many stuff by just, I got to learn so much stuff about SpaceX because of all the tourists that they came. They were so knowledgeable about what they were watching. So I have a small education on SpaceX because of that. But
Nice.
yeah, it's funny. But for everyone, driving close there to Boca Chica in Texas is definitely worth 2-3 hour drive if wherever you have to go and see there what they're building. And one of the interesting things, I got shocked, bro. You can understand. Every week they were building a new tent, a new facility. They are so fast. They have 24/7 people working shifts and all this stuff. And it's like, it's so beautiful to see such a big company operating like a startup in real life. So it was very, very inspiring. But by the way, I don't say stuff normally me out of my experience, but I knew that you are going to appreciate this, and probably the audience, since we are on the topic and I have some knowledge. So shifting gears to
for sure.
what you know most, which is Tesla. You are one of the most knowledgeable people, public people, that they are no longer at Tesla now that you know so much about Tesla. So I'm curious to hear, you covered this a lot on your channel, but future of the Cybertruck, Optimus, future of Tesla down the line.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the kind words. Thank you for that. I think the Cybertruck specifically, I think it's going to surprise a lot of people. I'm already seeing a lot of very unique reactions out of it. I'm fortunate because I live in the Austin area in Texas, and I've already seen the Cybertruck in person after they launched it like 2 or 3 times on the road, driving around. And it looks absolutely insane in person. It looks completely crazy. But I think that the Cybertruck will surprise a lot of people because the vehicle doesn't just look crazy. It actually has some function to it, a lot of function to it that actually makes it a superior product to, say, a regular gas truck in a lot of cases. And a lot of that is related to running costs of the Cybertruck. So it's going to be a lot cheaper to run than a gas car or a gas truck because electric is way cheaper than gas, and electric motors are way more efficient than a gas motor. And then you also have things like steer-by-wire, which is powered by the 48-volt architecture, which makes the truck feel very small to drive. So one of the biggest things about a pickup truck, and some people like this, but I don't know why they would. Most people, I think, find this a hassle, is that a pickup truck feels very big when you drive it. You know, you got to turn the wheel a bunch of times. The driving dynamics are optimized to have something in the bed, so your ride quality is not the greatest in the pickup truck. And the Cybertruck has sort of fixed this in a lot of similar ways than, say, the Rivian R1T has, which the Rivian is a phenomenal product as well. But where the Cybertruck, I think, is going to have a big advantage is that it's manufactured for really high quantities, where the Rivian R1T is manufactured to be made in, say, maybe 50,000 units per year. The Cybertruck is going to be made at least for about 250,000 units per year. And I expect that to be more. I think, this is just a guess, but based on how much attention the truck is getting, how much demand there is for it already, the fact that Tesla doesn't really advertise that much, if at all, in a lot of countries, and how that truck is going to perform in the real world, I do think that Tesla's probably going to be able to sell 500,000 of these per year, which will put it right in line with, say, a Chevy Silverado, Ram 1500 type truck, which are like the second and third biggest truck makers in the world, behind the F-150, the Ford F-150. Who knows? They might sell more than F-150 at some point. But so that in itself is going to create the Cybertruck. I believe it's going to be incredibly successful because of that dynamic. And then if you go down the road with more of their products, you got Tesla's full self-driving suite, which is going to allow people to not have to drive, which, that is game-changing by nature. It's probably going to be slow in how it gets rolled out because there's a lot of regulations. There's a lot of laws that the company has to follow. But then that same exact hardware and software that they're using for the cars to drive themselves, they're using that same exact thing to power the Optimus robot, which is a humanoid robot that's going to learn by watching somebody do a task. Like, let's say it's going to be able to watch me fold laundry, and then it's going to learn how to fold laundry, and then that robot plus every other robot that has ever existed will learn how to do laundry, like the Matrix, right? But you just have a human or robot. And they don't have to do anything different, really, from the car. They've set up the hardware and software so that they feed a bunch of data to the AI, and the AI figures out how to move the object. You know, with the car, it figures out how to drive. With the robot, it figures out how to walk, pick up stuff, fold things, wash things, so on and so forth. So if Tesla figures out how to do that, you know, let's say Tesla figures out how to do that, then we have a disruption in the physical world, because now you're going to have a robot that's going to be able to do a lot of physical tasks that people can do now. And that's part of like that age of abundance. Is now we've dropped the prices of things so much because the cost of building something and the cost of some sort of service becomes pennies on the dollar, because you're paying for a robot one time that's probably going to cost somewhere between $25,000 to $50,000 in, say, the United States, versus paying somebody $50,000 per year with health insurance and whatever else goes on top of that. So the costs of everything come down. But then the other side of that, it becomes, okay, so then what are people going to do? Like, what's going to happen now? If physical jobs are now done by the Optimus robot, what are people going to do? If, you know, we don't need truck drivers and taxi drivers anymore, what are people going to do? And that's where, you know, I spend a lot of time thinking about how that transition is going to happen, because I feel like it's that middle part of going from where we are today to an age of abundance. There's going to be a lot of societal disruption, because these technologies, I believe, are going to happen a lot faster than people think. And typically governments are there to ensure that the transition is clean to go from one place to another. But from my experience, most governments are very slow, especially in the United States. The government is very reactionary, is not proactive. And so we're probably going to have to experience a lot of disruption, a lot of loss of work, a lot of crisis of meaning before we reach that age of abundance. But that middle part is weird. That middle part is weird. And I spend a lot of my time thinking about that. And Tesla will likely be one of those companies that are leading from the front when it comes to transitioning us to an age of abundance. But then we need other bodies to step in and help us understand how to solve for the crisis of meaning and the potential massive disruption of jobs that we'll likely experience from this transition. And I'm not saying this is bad or good. I'm just saying this is what's happening. And I think we need to figure out how to do that cleanly.
It's difficult to actually imagine robots in the real world. When you were talking, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. But like, what are the jobs? And then I was starting to imagine, oh, I'm a YouTuber and I need a videographer to film me. I would probably not need a videographer to film me. I would just need a robot to follow me around and it will do an amazing job or something like that. So I want you to walk me through like the transition and like what are the actual jobs and how it enters the real world.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So we'll definitely start with jobs that have, you know, like a low skilled labor that requires something as simple as moving something from part A to part B, right? So for example, I'm from the distribution world. When I used to work at Tesla, I was in parts distribution. So a lot of the functions are pick up objects from this place and then move it to this place. Manufacturing is the same thing. You have a manufacturing line, but you also have to take the objects from one place and bring them to another place, right? A lot supply chain, which is the thing that makes the world go, is move things from A to B. I'm sure a lot of people can conceptualize if you can have a robot that, you know, you don't even have to change the area that the person works in today, right? A lot of these jobs are optimized for people. There is a lot of robotics in places like Amazon. There is a lot of like automation in places like Amazon and Tesla and stuff. But most companies don't have that. Most companies, the areas are optimized for people. And so if a lot of these jobs are just pick up thing and put it down somewhere else, why can't a robot do that? And then all of a sudden you have a massive disruption in industries like supply chain, distribution, manufacturing, because you can literally plug and play a human with a robot. Right? So that's one example. Another one is things like lawn care and maybe potentially construction. If these bots are designed to just learn from humans, and they have fingers and they can manipulate things. This is going to take a while. Again, I want people to ensure that I'm not saying this is going to happen tomorrow, but this will happen at some point. This might happen in 20 years. This might happen in 10 years. This might happen in 50 years, but it will happen at some point. If you have jobs where somebody's picking up an object and manipulating it to build something, right? Like say in construction work, one of the biggest things about construction is that it's often dangerous. You have to take a lot of steps to ensure that people are safe, rightly so. You got to make sure that they're harnessed in, that they're wearing the right gear, that the tools are optimized for safety, and so on and so forth, right? But then if you have a human or a robot that's able to do that at a fraction of the cost over the long term, because you're not paying a person, per year, you're just paying for the robot, and the robot's able to do it. And you don't have to worry about, quote unquote, the safety of that robot, because you just replace it with a new robot if something goes wrong. Then you can go a lot faster than you can now with a human because of that safety dynamic. Then you don't have to worry about the human getting tired or getting sloppy, because robots are robots. They don't have to sleep, right? And so now you have a leverage. You can now 2 to 3x the work output out of the robot versus the human in that same job. And so now you have a forcing function that says the company will prioritize for the robot because they know they can cut their costs down by 2, 3, 4x. Especially because they don't have to worry about safety. They don't have to worry about HR. Oh, and by the way, the cost of the robot costs a lot less than paying a human. And I can go down the list, right? Like literally anything where you can picture a person doing a task with their hands, a robot's going to be able to do. And I'll use the ChatGPT example for the digital world, right? ChatGPT hasn't really, and this is like the positive side scenario. ChatGPT, in a lot of cases, has disrupted people's work. Has allowed people to have like 2 to 3x potential on, say, like coding or something. Your best coders are now way better because they have access to something like ChatGPT, which in turn could replace 2 or 3 coders that you don't really need anymore because your top performer becomes 2, 3, 4 times better, right? And this happened in the digital world. This happened with coding. This has helped me with some of my creative stuff for my content. Like say I want to do research and I want to spend time throwing out some ideas and having the AI throw something back at me that I can think about. It has helped there. But then you can also use ChatGPT to potentially create artwork or DALL-E or Midjourney. Instead of paying somebody like an art person, like somebody that can make your thumbnail X number of dollars, you could use Midjourney and Canva, and you can slap something together, and it could probably be 80-90% as good as most of the stuff that you get from most people. So then your bottom 50% of the folks that create thumbnails are now disrupted because you either use Midjourney or you pay the best, right? So like whatever's happening in ChatGPT world right now, I think is going to happen in the physical world. I do worry about the impact to the economy in a way, in the medium term, until we get to that age of abundance. That was a long answer to your question, dude. I don't even know what your original question was.
While you were talking, I was thinking,
I'm sorry.
No, it was perfect. So much knowledge in 10 minutes of answer. So while you were talking, you said you were explaining how it will happen in the real world with the robots. And I was thinking, okay, Tesla, they want to use their vehicles as Ubers after when you don't use them. Probably this will happen with the robots as well. There will be the mailman, there will be the babysitter, there will be the cleaner, and there will be the factory worker when they are have nothing to do or something. So, wow.
Yeah. You think about so for example, in my neighborhood, if I have a bot that knows how to fold laundry, like I could just have it walk down to my neighbor and be like, yo, give me $5. I'll send the bot down to your house. Why wouldn't that happen? Or stick the bot in my self-driving Tesla and have it drop off the bot 30 miles away from here to help somebody fold the laundry. Like, why couldn't I do that?
Are governments going to control these things, or because it makes so much sense for governments to control these things? Or you think private companies will?
I mean, I think governments will definitely try to control it. I think, because, you have to think about like each country definitely has a different way of operating a government, obviously. I think if I talk about the United States, which I think, the government that I'm most familiar with by far, I think that, you have like this dynamic of like state government and federal government here in the States. Some states are much more free market, like Texas is very much free market, where regulations are not, you don't need as many regulations as say New York to start a business or to run a business. And it does typically mean that you get stuff done way faster. But when it comes to things like robotics, I think where governments are going to want to regulate, probably very heavily, they're going to want to regulate. I'm not going to say they will be able to regulate, or even if I want them to regulate, really. But I think that the how we should think about it is there will be disruption to human work from automation, from robotics. And so I think where governments are going to want to step in is to try to somehow tax the companies that are taking advantage of this labor, to try and supplement the people that lose their jobs with some sort of basic income of some sort. Like, I think that's probably what's going to happen from the government's perspective. In addition to regulating for safety, obviously, like we want to make sure we have safe regulation, ensuring that we have robots that are working in a safe manner and all that stuff. That stuff's definitely going to happen. But if we're talking about like where they're going to have the most impact, most likely, especially as it pertains to us as human beings, they're probably going to want to regulate the amount of money that would generate these companies. But the flip side of that, and this is where it gets really interesting, is at some point, this will be a deflationary force, because now you're going to have all these robots. They're going to be able to do things a lot more accurately, a lot faster. And they're going to, you get enough of them in a building, they're going to be able to do 10x more than a human would for the same exact amount of money as you would pay a human or less, which means that everything, supply and demand will say everything else becomes cheaper over time, especially if demand continues to grow for the product, or the supply continues to grow for the product, which brings prices down for everybody else. So it's not, the amount of money they'll be able to raise from this technology in day one will be the same in day 1,000. It's just the robots doing 10 times the amount of work, and then we have an age of abundance from that thing that they're creating. And so it's interesting, like okay, the regulation for robots and automation is going to look very different on day one versus what it looks like, I think, in day 1,000 or in day 10,000. And watching that transition is gonna be interesting, because my gut tells me, at least in places like the United States, I think we're going to have well-meaning regulation and well-meaning laws that could actually stifle or create a disincentive for this technology to be implemented because of how that law and regulation is implemented for robotics. And I honestly, I'm still thinking about how that's actually going to play out, because it still feels a little bit ways off. Like, I don't think Tesla's bot is going to hit like our lives in very high quantities until like the latter half of this decade. But now that I say it, it sounds a lot sooner than most people think, because I don't think most people expect to have a human or robot in the house folding laundry in 2028. And I think that's very possible.
Wow. One thing, I had Robin Hanson, I don't know if you know him, it's a famous economist, and he was explaining me this concept of after you have all this artificial intelligence and robots and all this stuff, the economy, now it takes one economy to double, it takes 50 years and now 7 years. And then when you have all these things, it will take less and less time to double. And after, the economy with the production will be doubling in weeks, in days, in minutes.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to even think about this.
Yeah. But that's where we're going, that's like, it feels like that's where we're going. It's like, at some point, we're going to be limited by the materials that we have to make the things that the robots are making. But at some point, the robots will go out and figure out how to get the raw materials in a cheaper, easier, more plentiful way. We'll have AI systems that can solve for, like, for example, if I were to use the petroleum example, in the United States or, globally too, once we started having a tough time finding oil by like regular means, we started fracking. And so fracking is a different technology that goes in the rock and creates cracks in the rock. And then you can draw oil out of like reserves that are tough to get at. But fracking, is a technology, right? But in 10 years time, you could be like, Mr. AI or Mrs. AI, can you tell me a better way? Can you solve for a better way to get blah, right? Much better than humans can. And then the robot can just be like, okay, that makes sense. I'm going to go do it. And then the robots just go do it. And that's also going to help bring those costs down and create more and more production, right? Yeah, it's very weird. It's a very weird transition. It's, and I think we can debate how long it's going to take, but short of us killing ourselves with a nuclear war or something tragic happening, this seems like the likeliest outcome. That we're going to live in a world where basically almost anything we can think of, something just fell, basically almost anything we can think of will be at within hands, like it's like right there, and it won't cost that much, if anything, really, because we're not going to be making them. Robots are going to be making them. AI is going to be making it, and AI is going to be solving for ways to do it better all the time, constantly getting better, constantly getting faster, constantly getting smarter. It's so wild, dude. It's so weird.
Where do you stand on the debate, on the disagreement, on the fight that Elon had with Larry Page, the CEO of Google?
Yeah.
And they stopped being friends because one person, which Larry Page, believes that we should let evolution do its thing, and if we are going to if they will kill us all, maybe for a greater future of the planet or the human or the cosmos or something, let it be. But Elon Musk is saying, no, let's make sure that the people will be safe first. Where do you stand on this debate?
Yeah, this is like for me, it's such an easy answer, right? And this is especially more now that I'm expecting a kid, like a son, all right? If I'm just letting the AI, like if you think I'm comfortable with having another thing decide what's best for me and my kid, no, I don't like that at all. I don't like that at all. I don't care how much smarter or how much more benevolent and benevolent, can't even say the word right, and how kind this AI thing is in sort of the image of perfection and the image of the universe. The idea that I somehow have to succumb to that doesn't sit well with me at all. I want to be able to craft my own future for what I want. Because like what else does it mean to be alive? And that people will say, well, there's a higher purpose, there's a higher being in there. I'm like, okay, I understand, I'm not particularly religious. I would say that I'm starting to really become a little bit more spiritual in a way, like I'm starting to feel more connected to the universe in some way. But for me, it's like, but I still don't understand why somebody would be comfortable just allowing the artificial intelligence to make decisions on our behalf that could also mean, delete humans or, let's not worry about humans. This is where we're going to go. That doesn't sit well with me at all. I think humans, as we're alive for a reason, and ending being alive doesn't seem like a solution. Like I'm just alive to just disappear forever. And maybe I'm naive. Maybe my brain's too small. Maybe I'm not thinking about this big enough. Maybe I'm not, I'm not at the level of where Larry is, where he's thinking about this stuff. Maybe I'm being too greedy about what I mean to the universe. Maybe I think of myself as too valuable. But I don't know, man. Like, I don't know.
Okay,
I'm much more on Team Elon in that case.
I will say something stupid here, but we are bunch of monkeys on Earth. So how do we what do we know about what's the greater good or all this stuff that maybe, and the AI with all the data and all the information us collect that will be a lot smarter than us, maybe it will know something more if they will let us live. Or if we need to die for the greater good and go discover all the other human beings in the other universes, and I don't know. So this is kind of some argument to support Larry's opinion because he's not here.
Yeah. No, yeah, and I appreciate that, and I can definitely. I don't understand it, but I can see it. Like I can see that point. But for me, it's like, okay, then why be alive then? Why live? What's the purpose of us being alive then?
Well, for now, we need to be alive for us to do stuff and create what we think is the future. But maybe at some point, we did our thing. Like when you are 85 years old and you created a child and they have grandchildren and all this stuff, they will take over. You will die anyway. So we are going to die anyway in 50 years. So let them do what I don't know. I'm so stupid to argue about this stuff.
Me too.
So let's move to let's move to the next topic, which I'm not sure if you are super familiar with it, which is Neuralink.
Yeah, I'm a little bit familiar with it. I'm not nearly as in depth as say folks that follow it very closely. There's this gentleman called Ryan. Oh my God, I'm blanking on his last name. But if you look at, he has a podcast called Neuropod, I believe, which is a great resource for people to go check out. Yeah, I mean, Neuralink feels very far away still. I know in the next few years, they're going to start trialing the technology for people that have lost, the ability to move their limbs, the ability to see. It could potentially solve for some mental disorders, potentially, which is all extremely exciting. But I think over time, like the 20, 30, 40-year goal of the technology is to be able to have humans be able to communicate with each other telepathically almost, and like have it so that you can access humanity's consciousness through your brain. It's kind of like if you can't beat them, join them. That's like the idea behind it. Let's have Neuralink so we can be as close to AI as possible so that we can influence AI in a positive way. We don't let it just kind of do its thing. That's kind of the overarching goal. So it's an exciting technology for sure. But again, it opens a can of worms, right? If you can always be in here, and being in here feels 1,000 times better than real world, or whatever that means, then what's the point of the real world, right? And like it's a Pandora's box that we're opening that feels very exciting, that I think is going to be hopefully net benefit for humanity, but it is a Pandora's box. And that's one thing that I'm trying to like be very cognizant of, is society and humanity will be impacted by this greatly at some point. But it is very, very, the thought of having people potentially be able to walk again because of this is insane. Like, I love that. Of course. Why wouldn't we want that? That's like insanely great. And then once we go 20 years down the road, then I'm like, okay, I think we want that, but what does that mean? Like, what does the world look like then when we are able to do everything from our minds? And, like me picking up this thing in my hand in the physical world, I can do the same exact thing in the digital world. It will feel the same. It will look the same. It will smell the same. It will taste the same. Then what's the point of the physical world at that point?
Why do you think Elon was and is able to see so far ahead in the future?
That's a great question. I mean, I think, again, I don't know him personally, but I would say he's probably this way because of just who he is. If you read his biography from Walter Isaacson, which is really freaking good, I highly recommend everybody checks that out. It's just called
we're
Elon
going
Musk.
to talk about that later because that was a fucking crazy book. Yeah, continue.
Yeah, it was wild. It was wild. I think it's just a naturally curious person, and I think his ability to solve challenges and technology. I just think the way he solves problems, he solves by thinking about the end goal. And this is almost like maybe it's learned. Maybe he learned this skill while he was building his businesses. And, you know, maybe the logic tree is, if I'm trying to build something that's super helpful for humanity, I need to think about the end state of what I want that thing to look like. And then every step that I need to take to get there is this, and this, and this. And so everything he does on any given day is based on getting to that end goal. And he's able to conceptualize what that end goal should be. And that's maybe where he's very unique. That's where his genetics kick in and his life experiences kick in. And that's what sets him apart from everybody else. That's what I think. I mean, if I were to guess, and if you read the book, that's kind of like, I think there are some clues to that in the book as well. You know, just his grand vision, the fact that, you know, when Walter says, I used to think that he would just say this because to motivate people and to make people feel excited about the future, just as a marketing ploy, but not really. Like, he deeply believes this. Like, he's actually really, he wants this to happen for not just for himself, but for his fellow human beings. You know, if you're thinking about that all the time, then my guess is just probably spending a lot of time also thinking about, okay, how do I get to that end point? And so versus like, you know, maybe a lot of business leaders are like, okay, how do I maximize profit? How do I maximize revenue? How do I lower costs? That's not a vision. You know, that's not this is what it needs to look like. This is here's what I have today, and these are the levers I have to pull to raise my sales by 10% or lower my costs by 10%, you know, instead of like, this is what I want it to look like. And I mean, let's give credit to people like Jeff Bezos. Let's give credit to people like freaking Bill Gates and all these other people, entrepreneurs as well, that have a similar ability of setting a grand goal for what they want their companies to be and then reaching it. It's just Elon is able to do this over and over and over and over and over again, right? Most people do this once or twice in their career. Elon's done this like 15 times. And he keeps doing it. So he doesn't burn out, obviously. So, I mean, he does burn out probably, but he's able to push through the burnout. And I think it's something that is very near to him as a person. Like, he connects with it deeply. And that's why he's able to do it constantly, is because I think he's personally very much invested in ensuring that the outcome does come to fruition. Like, maybe he views himself, you know, that was one of my takeaways from the book too, is like maybe he views himself as somebody that if he's not constantly working towards those goals, that he is not doing everything he can as a human being to be helpful. Maybe that gives him a lot of anxiety, that if he's not doing that all the time, that maybe it's debilitating anxiety, you know, because I do think, I mean, he clearly has a lot of demons. He has a lot of things he has to work through as a human being. And, you know, and in his interview with the New York Times on that panel where he said GFY, there was also another great question about, you know, his mind being a storm. Is it a happy storm or a sad storm, angry storm? And he said that it's not a happy storm, you know? And yeah, so I think that fuels him too, to get those long-term visions done, because the unhappy storm, you know, will show you what the bleak thing looks like. You know, if we don't transition to sustainable energy, we will collapse because we'll run out of oil. If we don't become a multiplanetary species, we will collapse because we'll just die on Earth at some point. You know, like the whole X thing. If we don't ensure that freedom of speech exists, we'll all succumb to an authoritarian regime that's going to collapse society potentially. These are very like existential, anxiety-ridden missions that somebody like me, for example, if I were to take that on, I'll just die on day 5 because I have too much anxiety from trying to figure this thing out. But he's somebody that I think has figured out how to he's figured out how to make it part of his being, I think. And that's why he's so successful at completing those visions.
curious to hear your thoughts on this idea that I have for the answer that I ask you the question as well. So I think the reason why he's so ahead in the future, his ideas, is because he's a philosopher and scientist in a way. And he thinks about problems fundamentally and nothing else. So where humanity is going, how the future will be like in a way, and being able to picture it, and like where our impulses and all this stuff. And that's probably the big, and having is so unique that you can have a business mind, you can have all these skills or blah, 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 complementing that. But I think that's where this is coming from.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. I agree with you 100%. I think the philosophy part of it is totally there too. Because you mean when you listen to him talk to other people, like he trends towards philosophy often. Like as somebody that's probably listened to every freaking interview he's given. In every single interview he's given, there is some sort of philosophical undertone.
Me too. You are the first one in the world.
Yeah.
I was talking with Mr. Beast as well, and we were competing which one is the biggest Elon Musk fan. So it's very rare to find a person that binge more interviews than you.
Yeah. He's just such a fascinating person. He really is. He's so unique and just fascinating. And it's just, as another human being, I'm just watching him. I'm like, dude, this dude's so unique. It's just so, there's no one else like him. He's a unique person in humanity. But I do think that the philosopher sort of undertone is very much there. And you can see it in his words. You can see it about how he thinks about everything fundamentally. And, if you really think about like a first principles approach of physics, of trying to not reason by analogy, by reasoning by the truth, the core truths, is a philosophy in a way, because that's philosophical. Like what are philosophers really good at, like you said, is getting to the root cause of existence. Like, why do we exist? What are the core things that are building the foundation of where everything else is built? And that's just physics, bro. But he's just applying it to just existence in a way. I think that I'm really happy you said that. I've never really thought about that before. I think you're 100%
right. Coming to the question that I ask every guest. Are you ready?
Yes.
I give you $1 trillion. How do you spend it for maximum impact in the world? Positive impact.
Man, I hate this question. Damn it. So the biggest challenge that the biggest challenge with money is that when you have that much money, is that it's going to be so easy to waste it. It's going to be so easy to waste it. So what my head goes towards is like, okay, what is the maximum amount of sort of thing that we can get out of each dollar spent? Because the last thing I want to do is take $1 trillion, take, say, $1 billion of that, put it towards an effort that I think is going to work. But because I've personally never deployed $1 billion worth of capital, that I'm going to be afraid that I'm going to somehow waste 80% of it. I hire the wrong person. I give it to the wrong charity. I work on something that's not actually helping people, right? And then you're just kind of like, you're just dumping all this incredibly impactful stuff into things that are not actually helping anything. It's just kind of like waste. Like I almost become like a government. If I have $1 trillion to maximize impact on humanity, I would be no different than a government, like the US government, trying to allocate $1 trillion of its budget, right? But it's up to me to decide. So here's what I would do, because I've never actually thought about what I would do with $1 trillion, but it's a great question. The process would be I would start very small. I would figure out who are the people that I'm going to partner with that I know will deploy this cash in a way that is maximally helpful for humanity. And I would somehow want to be able to really get close to how this money is actually deployed. So like, this is like what Mr. Beast does extremely well. He is very close to how the money he's using to give to charity or to put towards the philanthropic causes. He's there. He's boots on the ground. He knows exactly where the money's going, and he's filming what's happening, right? So I think that model is beautiful. I don't know if I will broadcast it to the world. Maybe I will. That's probably smart. Maybe Mr. Beast will get some competition finally. But it would be one of those things where I would have to start small, because my goal would be to maximize every dollar. And so what are some of the core things that humanity needs the most to me? I think shelter, food, like what are the core essentials for humanity? Shelter, food, education. Shelter, food, education. So that I would do those three things. And I would just have to figure out, okay, for every dollar that I spend on education, what's the best way? Should I start small in a village somewhere and set up some sort of school that is able to teach these kids and the people in that village about the world and economics and other countries' languages and all that stuff. I'll start local as well. I'll help my local community do it. So, this is probably a very long answer to your question, but this is how I think about this stuff, is like, I need to come up with a process to ensure that no dollar gets wasted. And hopefully over time, I'll scale up bigger and bigger. But the three root things that I'll probably start with that are foundational to humans is food, shelter, education. And then as we get bigger and we impact more lives, maybe we'll do other things as well.
You mentioned the book of Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson. Mm-hmm. How was your experience reading it?
It was very interesting. I felt that Walter did a really good job being neutral. One of the things that I'm sick of and tired of in this day and age is that there are so many people, so many journalists and writers that feel like they have to insert their opinion on something that's happening. What I loved about Walter was that he just showed us what it was for what it was. So here it is. This is what the guy is. The great things, the terrible things, the ugly things, the beautiful things. And as a reader, I felt like I was able to formulate my own opinion on what I saw and what I read. To me, so outside of Walter doing a really freaking good job writing that book, to me, what I think my takeaway is that I do think Elon, in a way, I kind of feel bad for him, to be honest. Like as a human, like I definitely don't feel bad for him as far as like how much wealth and power he has. The dude can take care of himself for sure. There's nothing I can do that will make his life better. He's in a really, really good spot. But I think like from a human aspect of it, I do think, he's somebody that's a little bit of a tortured soul. He does definitely come across as somebody who has had, the hardship of his younger years and maybe even his later years. I think it's made him afraid to be comfortable is my sense. Is that if he's not comfortable and living like a normal quote unquote life, it seems like he's just overridden with anxiety, and he is very much attracted to chaos. But I can totally understand that because, while I was at Tesla, it really exposed me to what being in a chaotic environment really means, and overcoming challenges in a chaotic environment. And I'm sure you feel this as a big creator as you are. Like if you get a high from solving difficult things, from achieving big things, you feel incredible. And when you're surrounded by other people that do that same exact thing with you, it feels like you've all gone to war and won. And I think he's addicted to that feeling. And he can't get away from it. And when he gets away from it for too long, I think he has a lot of demons that he battles through that makes him feel uncomfortable. And he goes and buys Twitter when he feels that way, So yeah, that's the sort of takeaway I got from Elon. I think I think he can't help himself but to try and be useful every moment that he's awake. He almost feels like an existential need to be useful. I think sometimes that ends up doing more harm than good, but he's human and he's allowed to be human. You know, where some people are like, oh, this is proof that this person is a bad person. For me, it's like, this is proof that this is a human being. And yeah, it was very eye-opening from that perspective. You know, I think it humanized him a lot too, to other people. I think a lot of people that maybe were viewing him as like a kind of like a do no wrong figure, which I don't think anybody should be viewed ever. I think it humanized them in a way that's like, yeah, this dude makes mistakes just like you and I do. It's just he's learned from his life experiences on how to put those to good use in a lot of cases. And sometimes it goes wrong, but it does seem like he's a good person and he will correct for it at some point. So it was wild.
One of the things that it was very crazy for me is that he cannot stay alone. I couldn't believe that he cannot stay alone.
Yeah, I can. Just because of what I described. You know, if you're alone, you get to fight this guy in here. You get to fight your mind when you're alone, right? So the clue, I'm not, and listen, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm like talking like a freaking psychiatrist here. I have no idea what I'm talking about. This is just what I think is happening. But when you're alone, you're, you know, I'm sure you've experienced this. Your mind starts to take over. And if you're not at peace with what's in here, it becomes difficult to be alone, I think.
One of the things that you mentioned, this book showed so much vulnerability of this, of him, and vulnerability, as far as I know from my experiences with YouTube. When I became more vulnerable and all this stuff, it's when you create people to relate to you and create fans that actually love you because of who you are. So it made him not look like this figure that is untouchable. It made him feel like a human. So I agree with you. But it did a lot, this book. Especially for me that I was his fan. It like made me his best friend, not only his fan. So
sure.
It's interesting. Okay. I'm curious. One journalist told me to say this question close to the end. Do you have anything that you feel that we didn't talk about today? Anything that you think we should mention?
I mean, I think we covered a lot, man. This was a really awesome sort of long-ranging discussion about a lot of really interesting topics to me. I think you did a really good job asking very interesting questions. I love your interview style because it's like very conversational. And you're just asking like a big question and you let somebody, or maybe this is just me, you're letting me talk way too much. But I love how like you frame your questions to be big picture. And from that standpoint, I think we've hit really everything that is big picture and stuff that, like this kind of conversation doesn't really happen all that often, especially, as it pertains to like somebody like an Elon. Like if like Elon in the, say, mainstream media is a disaster. Elon in legacy media is a disaster. And so like this sort of like conversation around, as somebody that has, what does his social power mean? What does his, money power mean? What kind of a person is he? Like stuff like that's very interesting in addition to all the other companies that, of his companies that we talked about. So from my standpoint, I thought we hit a lot. And unless you have anything else for me, I don't think I can't think of anything.
Yes. Before we move to the last question, I just want to say that, oh my God, I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Probably this was one of my favorite podcasts, if not the favorite, because I think we connect and understand each other more deeply because we're both fans of Elon. We both, have the education from Elon, and we're similar type of people, and you need to be similar type of person to be. So I really connected with you. And now we're moving to the last question, which I'm sure you're not going to like.
Well, likewise, man. I really do feel a connection to you too. And I agree with you 100%.
So you are going to die after this podcast. And if you actually die in the next 50, 100 years, we're going to have these seconds, 40, 50 seconds to look back to what are your last words, what you want to broadcast to the world or to your family. So the stage is yours to close the podcast with your last words.
Huh. I'm thinking deeply on this because I want to test this out when my time comes. I'm going to be like, go check out this video and see if it was the answer. If it was the same thing. I think we live in a time where division could really put us in a really bad place as a species. And I really hope that everybody, my gut feel is that everybody knows that we are all the same. We're all human beings. When I feel love, you feel love in the same way. When I feel hate, you feel hate in the same way, right? It's just the context is different. So I guess like if I had any last words, they would be, let's all just come together and give each other a huge hug as humans. Doesn't matter what our creed is, what our background is. Let's love each other for what we have in common and accept our differences, knowing that we're all humans in the end and we're all in this together. Those are my last words.
Thank you for your time.
Namaste.
Thank you guys for listening. I love you all.